Hello everyone, welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. Hello everyone and welcome to the Richest Men in Town. This is Mike Freeman, this time flying solo without Tyler Gould. If you caught the episode last week, you heard Tyler sharing some best of from the year 2020 on the Richest Men in Town podcast. We're giving Tyler the week off, and this week I've been pouring over hours of previous episodes from last year, looking back on some great lessons, trying to do my best to capture those things that resonated with me. I want to thank all of our guests. I want to thank our listeners. 2020, with everything going on, was still a pretty significant year with the launch of the Richest Men in Town podcast, something that's been living in Tyler and I's brain for a long time. So it feels good to be able to step into this new hobby, this new little passion project. So this episode, we take a look back. We look back gratefully, the lessons learned from our good friends. Some folks I knew going in, some folks I learned their names and met them through my friendship with Tyler. So I want to thank everybody for the way that they showed up when they are invited into this new adventure. Tyler and I are all geeked out, pretty excited. Our guests are pretty nervous because they don't quite know what to expect. And they exceeded our expectations. Again, thank you to all of the great folks that made the over 30 episodes of our first season of the Richest Men in Town such a success. We're sitting at over 8,000 downloads. Tyler and I, we've got a lot of great things in the works for 2021, and we're excited. But it really comes down to listening to our guests, paying attention to the nuggets that they drop, and make sure that we find a way to apply the lessons to our lives, and that we hold each other accountable as we grow. This project is always about doing better and being better. And in 2021, we're done being defensive. We're done looking at how this global pandemic has taken things away. And instead, it's time to go on the offensive. And it's time to figure out if COVID and the quarantine protocols have taken things away from our lives. It's time to replace them with maybe even some things that are better. We're not going to idly stand by and let time, our most precious commodity, go by without trying to improve ourselves. So to the future guests of Richest Men in Town, when the call comes, please say yes. Come on and share with us what it is that makes your life admirable. I hope you appreciate this episode. If you're new to the Richest Men in Town program, this is a great place to start. We've poured over last two episodes. We've poured over hours and hours of fantastic audio content. And this is a sampler plate, if you will, of the first half of the season 1, the Richest Men in Town podcast. Enjoy it. Be safe out there. Take care of one another. Be kind. And let's try to be like that George Bailey guy, right? Maybe he was on to something. Let's try to fill our lives with faith, with family, with fun, and with impact, right? With influence on those around us. Enjoy this, my version of the best of some of my favorite moments from the first season of the Richest Men in Town podcast.
All the unrest and everything that's going on right now is mostly because people don't know who they are. I mean, there's no way we would treat each other poorly like we're seeing in the media if we all knew and believed that we were children of God. I mean, we wouldn't treat ourselves poorly and we wouldn't treat others poorly. And so for me, I'm always just trying to remind myself. So, I mean, I have to remind myself a lot too, because right. I got stuff. My favorite word is strive. And what a blessing that word is. Am I striving? That's all he cares about. If I stop striving, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble, you know, but I'm so grateful for that word.
There are more people that are good people than we maybe get exposed to, right, through like media and everything else. You know, we get exposed to the worst of the worst. But I think too that there's a lot of people that know who they are, and they know who their eternal potential, but like Mike said, they've forgotten, you know. And I love your point that if we just remind people of who they are, you know, that stuff comes flooding back really quick. We had a great conversation with a couple of guys, Rajiv and Stephen Mitchell, who I was impressed with. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to those episodes.
Yeah, I feel like they're my friends. They don't know they're my friends yet, but I feel like they're my friends already. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just was impressed with their connection to the Spirit and their connection to who they were or who they are. And I feel like if there were more Dave Specks, more Rajivs, and more Stevens in the world, man, we'd be in a good spot, you know.
We as humans, we as children of God are amazing, capable, resilient people. But the resiliency is not a default. We think that by our nature, people are just tough and their kids will bounce back. They're tough. People go through hard things. They're resilient. People are only resilient when a pathway is shown to them, right? If you can have somebody come into their lives and show them steps to a better way, then people are resilient. But that hope is a fragile thing. And when there is no pathway shown to them, hope can get lost. We've all talked to people that are hopeless, that have lost that hope because they've been told they can't, or they've been labeled, or they've labeled themselves. They've put a lid on their progression and they quit because they lose hope, because they lose their way, right? So part of that reminding is, hey, this is the way, right? This is who you are, and this is the way. And I think when we say those things and then we show them, take them by the hand, right? I'm going to butcher this reference, but I'm thinking of Acts, right? And I think Peter's walking up and the guy asks for alms at the temple. And he's like, hey, I don't have anything, but in the name of Jesus Christ, right? And reaches out his hands, is like, that's what people need. People need that hand reached out in faith in Jesus Christ and in who that person is. And that's how we lift people up. That's how I was lifted up. That's how your dad, that's how your mom, that's how it works.
Yeah. So I got a crazy story to tell you about trying to lift people up. So in my job before coronavirus, I was traveling a lot, and I developed this habit of taking homeless people to dinner with me. And I didn't tell my wife about this for a long time.
Whoa. Hold on. On this show, we have the luxury of our time. You got to dig a little deeper here. Where did that come from? What does that look like? Right?
Okay. So one time I was walking down the street, and a guy asked me for money, and I was uncomfortable, and it didn't make me feel good. And so I went back to my hotel, and I thought, why did I not feel good about that? And what I realized was, you know what I didn't like? I didn't like that I was reacting. Why did he have to ask me? Why didn't I get to him first? And from there, I started doing this on every trip that I would take. I guess not every trip, but on most trips I would take, I would go looking for somebody. And I would be prayerful about it because I didn't want to get myself into any real bad situations. But it changed everything for me in how I looked at people, because I was out looking for someone. And the easy thing to do is just to buy them a meal or something. But what they weren't used to is that someone wanted to spend time with them. And tell me about your story, man. How'd you get here? Tell me about your mom. And man, there's a lot of people on the street that are hurting and that have a mom that loves them and that's worried about them. And it was just good for me. It was good for me. I had some biases, and I still have biases that I'm working through. But it was a good experiment, and I'll keep doing it. But when I told my wife about it, she was a little concerned. I was having dinner with homeless people in crazy towns. So,
well,
but
I have a theory, and I want to throw my theory up against what maybe you've learned through that experience.
Sure.
I believe in hinge moments. We ask people about hinge moments all the time on this show. I can honestly believe, I believe that if I could go into Redding's got their fair share of folks with challenges on the streets. And I've often told my kids that I could go up to that person and ask them, you tell me the moment. You tell me the moment when this happened. And I bet you 9 out of 10 people can point to a day, right? Where maybe they needed a break. They needed to get rent in, or they had to choose between bills, or, somebody got sick, and that's when things started to get off the rails. They just got derailed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And I think too, Mike, that there's, so I think the three of us have had some great opportunities to help people in some really different circumstances, and I remember talking to a young woman a few years ago, and she was telling me that, and she was homeless, and she was telling me, I don't have anybody in my life, that cares, she has nobody. Right. And so I said, well, let's talk about that. Let's write some names down of some people that you have had in your life. Right. And she gave me some names, and then she systematically went through and said, well, this person doesn't care about me anymore, and I've offended this person, and this person's offended me, and and I said, well, who on this list were you the closest with? At one point in time I was really close with my sister, but that bridge is so burnt, there's no way. I said, well, why don't we call your sister? And she's like, I can't do that. That's not going to work. So I said, why don't I call your sister? Can I call your sister and have a conversation with your sister? And I'm telling you, I got on the phone with that sister who just was overcome with emotion, right? Like, where is she? Right? Just freaking out. And I said, well, she's here with me, and she's under the impression that she has no one in the world that loves her, And this sister, couldn't be further from the truth. You end up buying a bus ticket, and she went home to her sister.
Because that's it, right? That's what shame does. When you make mistakes, you put that label of shame on you, and you say,
right,
I'm not lovable.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? In the beginning of the show, right? We're talking about, hey, when people fall down, how do they get back up? Because there's plenty of people that get to that point that say, no one loves me. There's no way back. I've crossed the point of no return, and here I am with nothing to do but trod down this path of despair and hopelessness. But the reality is, in my experience, that there is people that are chomping at the bit to show that person love, right? And to help that person get back to where they need to be. Because on some level, in some way, shape, or form, we've all been in that person's shoes, right? And if we can remember that, I think that's powerful, right? We have to remember, Dave, when you're going out to say, hey, I want to find this homeless guy to have dinner with me at the Red Robin or whatever, the reason you're able to do that is because I think you can see some of you in that person, right? Can we put ourselves in people's shoes? I think that's an important thing for us to be able to do. Otherwise, we just look through the lens of judgment and say, well, sucks to be that guy, right?
But it doesn't even mean like I have to totally relate and be in their shoes. We have to humanize the issue.
Right.
That's a son, that's a daughter.
Yeah, that's it for me, Mike. That's it for me. I mean, what is, how worried is this guy's mother? Man, if that's not enough for me to do something, I mean, do it for his mother.
Yeah, I mean, here's the driver, right? What if that was my daughter?
Yeah.
What if that was my daughter? Who's going to be talking to my daughter? And who's going to pick up the phone when my daughter says, I can't go back to my dad because I burnt that bridge? Who's going to pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, you know what? I'm here with your daughter, and she needs some help. She's missing you. I mean, that's a powerful deal, man.
Well, and it's crazy because that's the only thing I would be praying for.
Yeah.
Right? I would be praying that she makes a contact with somebody that can reach out to me.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really by the grace of God that it's not my daughter.
Right.
Right?
For sure. Yeah.
Because it could easily be.
Oh, totally. I tell my wife all the time, I'm like,
a couple of different choices, a couple of different things, right?
We're a couple of choices away from being in that same spot. And the hope is, right, that Dave, as a dad of 6, right, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 6.
Right. As a dad of 6, the hope is, and I'm a father of 4. Mike's got 2 amazing kids. But as fathers,
I'm behind, man. I got to catch up.
I don't know if Kelly's going to be up for the task, my friend.
Yeah, you better clear that one.
Yeah, exactly. But the hope is that our relationships with our kids are at a point where if they do go off the rails, they feel like I can call my dad, I can call Dave, right? And he's gonna be nothing but love and bring me back. So
well, that's the question. That's the question, Tyler. What evidence have we given to our kids that is what the experience will be for them?
Absolutely. So here's my question for you, Dave.
That's a burning question, brother.
Yeah, no, and I think it is, and I think like it kind of part of my story, I think, is the fact that like my biggest fear is failure. And I think in that, I think the steps of taking small steps of courage in terms of like going in the direction of discomfort and unknown, where things are unknown. I think that's what I think. Courage is not a big thing. It's the small steps in the right direction, and the way you make a muscle grow is you keep tearing it, but you tear it slowly. If you tear it all the way, you get injury, but it's small tears that make a muscle grow. So I think that's part of kind of where I am. I think is this whole idea of, hey, being in that discomfort and being, fearing the unknown, but realizing that growth happens in that spot, and I think those are the small steps that I'd hope they'd tell me to do. I was tired of being an engineer, I just wanted a break. And the joke at that point was that I was trying to find myself, and Waldo, where's Waldo, was kind of the whole thing that kind of went around. People were like, oh, where is he? And so anyway, so this 3.5 week trip. What happens is I'm supposed to be in Tibet. I'm supposed to be in Thailand. So we do this trip in Europe, and then I go and travel in Europe a little bit more, end up going back to India, which I hadn't been back to India in 13 years because we'd been here in the States, and just with the visa stuff and all, it took me 20 years to get my citizenship. But because of that whole time, I couldn't travel out to the US. And so 13 years, I go back to India, and I am supposed to be in Phuket when the tsunami of 2004 happened. And my sister, my dad had a house in the UK at that time in London, and my sister is like, hey, let's go and do Christmas in England. And so I'm like, sure, and I was kind of upset because I'm like, I wanted to go spend some time in Thailand and Phuket and stuff, and I didn't. And the night I flew was the night the tsunami happened. Wow. And I could have been, and Phuket was one of the worst places hit in the tsunami. Right. So here I am, and this is kind of part of my selfishness. I'd spent a whole bunch of money, on myself during this time. And part of the thing was, hey, maybe if I do 1 month of mission, it'll pay for all my, all the money I wasted on myself. And so here I go, okay, I could have died. What can I do to kind of help, with the guilt again, but also just do something good, And so I ended up trying a whole different organizations, the Red Cross and some other places, and they're like, oh, if you have any experience, you can come help, you know. And I had some friends in Sri Lanka that ran a mission organization over there. And Sri Lanka was one of the, I think the second worst country to be hit
Okay.
by the tsunami. And so I spoke to them, and they're like, you know, we need somebody to design websites. Like, you know, can you design websites? I'm like, sure, I'm an engineer. I can design a website. You know? I remember buying this book, you know, Website for Dummies, that I read on the plane, you know, down there. And by the time I finished that month, that website looked like it was made by a dummy too. It wasn't my best work. But anyways, during that time, I ended up helping with, there was a project for building 350 houses and helping a whole village of 350 families. And we got $3.5 million for that. And I helped write this proposal. And so they asked me, like, hey, you want to come back and help with this? And so I came back to the States, sold my house, put stuff in storage, and ended up living in Sri Lanka for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And part of my backstory was my dad was always in social work, and I'd seen him beg for money and this whole thing, and I had made a vow that I would never go into social work. You know, I saw the negative pieces of that, and and that was something that I didn't want to do.
Right.
So I go there, and I realized that I just really, really enjoy this stuff. You know, I mean, helping out these people was just a cool thing. But I also realized that in the nonprofit and the social work, that if you don't have a heart for it, you don't have a passion for it, that it's very, very easy to go the wrong way and have the wrong motives and end up, because, you know, the accountability isn't as much. And it's just, you know, it's all about stories, and there's some stuff that you can very, very easily get misled, you know. And so I was there for 3.5 years, and I had to come back to the States every 6 months because of my visa. And so every time I came back, every 6 months, I'd go and stop in some country and go travel there for a couple of months, and then, you know, and come back. And this last time I decided to travel in China. I was there for a month, China and Tibet. And it was just a kind of a prayer. I'm like, okay, you know, God, if you want me to go down this line, you have to give me the heart for this, because I understand if I don't have the heart for it, that it's not going to go in that direction.
Can I stop you really quick? Can I stop you, Rajiv?
Yeah.
So did you always, did you grow up with faith? Was faith an important aspect of your family?
Yeah. So I grew up. Yeah. My mom and dad became Christians, I think in their late teens or early 20s. And so I grew up in church and, you know, did that whole thing. I didn't get serious till I was 21, actually, in the U.S. And there was a guy that came and spoke to our church, and the message was, quit playing with God. I'm like, I think you might be talking to me there.
So you're 21. You're 21, and you have a moment where it's starting to get real.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, you know, I played the whole, this was the days when I used to wear suits and go to church on Sundays, and then the rest of the week, you know, it was a different person, you know. And so I kind of played that for a long time, and it was only till that happened when I was 21 that changed. So
when you ask that, when you say that prayer in Tibet to have your heart changed, is there a moment that you can point to where you say, hey, this is where I really felt like there was this transformative moment for me after feeling drawn to that work?
Yeah, you know, I think it was a process, but I mean, you know, that was a time when I made a decision and said, okay, you know, I got to stop doing what I'm doing and change the course I'm going in. And, you know, and it wasn't like boom, and, you know, I'm heading in this direction. Sure. You know, it was a gradual thing, but it was an intentionality that, hey, you know, that I am made for a purpose, that there is a God that loves me, and you know, that life could be a lot better if I lived it, you know, in conjunction with him. So there was that, but it wasn't a, you know, but I remember, I mean, I can still remember the time when you spoke. It was the guy called Tim LaHaye, and he was a veteran. He had he was in a wheelchair, and but I just remember that message, and, you know, and I felt that God was talking to me and saying,
yeah,
you know,
that's awesome.
Time to be serious about it. And I actually made a commitment to faith when I was 6 years old. in the UK. And it was another crazy story, and I remember that too, but I know that just life got serious for me in my faith, at that age. And then, there's, I don't know how life goes with you guys with faith, but with me, it's been this up and down journey thing, and so that was a peak, and then I went down, and, and it
100%.
continues going in that direction, and it's a thing of continual changes in your path to get you focused in the right direction. Like, I had a heart for people, but it wasn't, I think it was more out of guilt than out of a passion, out of something that, was like the true reason for doing it. And I'm telling Mike about this, but I was in Tibet, and Tibet has just major oppression. It did at that time with the Chinese, and it was just, it's sad because the Chinese were trying to make a life, and they had an opportunity of a new country that they could try and get better. As a result, there's a lot of repression with these Tibetans. And I remember reading somewhere where they said that, especially girls in Tibet, that their likelihood of them going to prostitution is extremely high, because schooling was really difficult for them, and they weren't given much opportunity. And I see this girl, we're having like some tea in the morning at this cafe, and I see this girl just really articulate, and she speaks English, just a beautiful smile, was about 9 or 10 years old. And she, I see her, and I look at her, and I realize, like, her future or her destiny, like, is heading in this direction that's just really painful. And something just kind of hit me during that time. It was also a process, because when I traveled in Tibet, so I'd meet people, and we travel as a group, and a lot of times, I was with people from Europe and Caucasians, and I was the only guy that was a different color, but all the kids would follow me around, and they'd harass me, and they'd go, give me money, give me food and stuff. And they wouldn't bother everybody else, but they would somehow, and God used that whole process. And then this girl, looking at her in the eyes and realizing that, man, like, her destiny, like where she's heading, like, if nobody stops it, she's in this train going down this road that's going to lead to destruction and oppression, and that was the first breaking point of my life, as to go, okay, hey, and then it kind of hit me that, okay, the reason why I have so much, the reason why I was given so much, is that I can help people that don't have it, and like the switch came on, and go, okay, it's not a thing of guilt, it's a thing of, okay, hey, you've been given much, so you can help people that don't have it, and that was the start of this journey. That was in 2007, and then 2013 my dad died, and yes, it was a really cool story, because there was a couple of hinge moments during that time. The first thing was this buddy of mine saying, hey, let's go for a bike ride. And just, it was complete selfish, there was nothing at all that was, whatsoever good in it. It was just a thing of, hey, I'm tired of working, let me go and travel the world and do some stuff. And that was one hinge moment. And then, the other moment was, with this girl, and realizing that something, that I was made for something more, so yeah, and that was just, this, as an engineer, I wasn't a bad engineer, but I used to go to work because I made money, and that was my passion. That was my, like, I went there for a paycheck, I liked what I did, but there was nothing else behind it, and when I went to Sri Lanka, and I ended up like running this organization for 160 people, like a $3.5 million budget. I had never managed anybody, but like, I was so alive, and I like, okay, this is what I've been created for, and not, yes, I have skills in engineering, but this is kind of who I am. One thing that my daughter, she's 5 years old, and we cuddle before she goes to bed, and she watches TV. A lot of times, I'll cuddle, and it's like, it's the same, some kid program. And so I'll be on my phone, doing stuff on my phone. And every time she will snatch my phone from me, and she'd say, Dad, we need to cuddle here, And like, I had this moment a couple of weeks ago. I went on a bike ride with my two youngest, with my 6-year-old and my 7-year-old. And Tyler, I turned 50. I have never experienced this moment before. but it was this moment of being present, you know, and there was nothing, the future, the past, like for some reason, like my head, I remember all the smells. I remember the time with my kids, you know, and I have never experienced that, you know, at 50 years old, you know, and it's like, oh my goodness, I think that's like one of the biggest things that I think like my kids are showing me is the fact that, you know, like, it's like, oh my, you know, life goes by so freaking fast.
Yeah.
So fragile, you know, but yet we're concerned about is the future or somebody else or something else. But it's like, oh my goodness, this moment over here, you know, is a sacred moment, you know, and like, you know, I see my daughter, you know, yanks the phone out of, you know, and it's like, okay, you idiot, you know, this is someday she's gonna grow up and it's going to be different, you know, and I think like just being present in the moment and appreciating the moment, you know, and I look back and there's so many times that I just totally miss that, you know, in relationships, with, you know, with my wife and whatever there's been, that I've missed those moments that I could have been present in it, you know, and so that was, that's been a big like whack on the head, like, you know, like, you know, it's not, you know, life is about what you have right now.
Rajiv, you mentioned the ups and downs of faith, the ups and downs of life. Everybody's dealing with something. How does Rajiv deal?
I drink a lot.
Hold on, I got to write that down, Rajiv.
That's good. Let's add that to our strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
1987, we're married. In 1988, Mike, she told me that, and I was drinking to the point maybe once every 2 weeks, once every week, but she saw the cycle. I said 4 beers, it was 9 beers. I said 3 beers, it was 10 beers. Absurd. She said to me, listen, this can't continue if we are going to have children. And she said it in such a loving way, looking at me, that I don't rightly remember if it was before she said it or after, that I heard directly in prayer from the Lord, not audible, in my heart, Steve, to have a personal relationship with me, you need to stop. I went to one AA meeting, and 32 years later, I just celebrated 32 years of sobriety.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
it was actually pulled from me so immediate that I really know, in the same way I know about that Samoan man being an angel, I know the Lord took it. Yes, it's been hard every once in a while. I can't share a glass of wine with my wife. But as I've told Mike before, and I told kids, always when you're experiencing, and I'm really paying attention to anybody that is folks that are suffering in addiction with alcohol or drugs, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. But what happens is you get to a point where I hear, in this case, from my wife, and I heard from the Lord, that these consequences, so what I got going is a huge rear view mirror of rubble, broken relationships, broken promises, broken this, broken that, everything shattered in the rearview mirror, and it's giant. And my windshield is about 1/8 the size of going forward. I'm constantly looking back, and finally I say, enough rearview mirror. And because of Julie and the Lord, once I made that decision and he helped me, all of a sudden I got a shrinking of a rear view mirror, shrinking, and I have a widening windshield forward. That is what happened.
Yeah.
People that drink that don't think about drinking, they don't have a problem. I mean, that really turned me. That was like a key in the door.
Yeah.
Hold it. Do I think I have a problem? Yes, I do. And then the question is, what's the question next?
Right.
What am I going to do about it?
Right.
What am I going to do about it? And you can go ahead and one more time, but the echoes of what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? They're still there. Even if you try and silence them, even if it's a little squeaking sound in the corner of the room, what are you going to do about it? You got to do something about it, whether it's that, whether it's any change you need to make for yourself, for someone else, for your family, for a friend, mending something that went wrong.
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? The Lord has a great sense of humor too. Here, I'm going off Cyprus. A guy's got a sign. I want a hamburger. So, okay, I've got time. I'm going to get him a burger. I'm going to get him a soda and a big fry. Got it? And so I come over there. I'm shining my Christian apple, and I'm going to give him this stuff, right? And I talk to him. So how you doing? You got food now. Is there something else I can do for you? No. This is good. This is what I asked for. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Well, eat it right now. Come on, enjoy it. We rolled up the bag, and I just saw him kind of hold the bag, and then I turned the corner, and I saw him put the bag somewhere, right? So I'm walking back. So Julie was in the car at a gas station because it's a corner. I could have died. I have trouble controlling my size 14 shoes. Anyway, so I cross, and then a guy drives past in a truck. He waves at me and says, "Hey, I saw that you just saw that guy. I've got a burger for him." And so he pulls over in the same gas station. He hands me the stuff that he bought him, and I go back to the guy. I told Julie, wait, we've got a catering business here. I'm busy. So I go back. This is classic. I go back, and I say to him, "Okay, hold on a second. Gee, what do you have behind your backpack?" Well, it's nothing. Well, it was a bunch of Burger King burgers. And I said to him, "No, this is true." So I am really, listen, I'm thinking to myself the whole time, this is absolutely God at work. If I had never done this, I wouldn't have been able to laugh like the Lord is laughing. So I asked the guy, "Okay, hold on a second, man. Look, behind that thing, you got burgers coming out of your ears. You got stuff." I said, "What do you really want to do?" And the guy said, "I need to go to LA because there's a job I want to enter." Well, change your sign. Holy things.
Holy cow.
Okay, so anyway, I didn't have a marker. I should have actually really got him a marker and helped him with a sign. Oh, don't ask for burgers anymore. Give me back what I gave you.
Man, I love that, Stephen. That is, first of all, that's hilarious. Second of all, and I love. Here's my quote. I've got a whole list of quotes I'm writing down from Stephen. But change your sign. I mean, think about that. I mean, what are we projecting, right? And what do we really want to get to, and how are we really going to get there, and how often do we have too much pride to ask someone for the actual help that we need?
When faith became a source of power for you in your life.
Okay. First of all, being raised in the Catholic Church, I was an altar boy. The Catholic Church was a very good undergirding for me to understand our reverence and how powerful God was. And that was a very important thing. Now, I did get through the Catholic Church because of the missalette. And so when you're reading and responsorial psalms that you're repeating, and when you're reading it, you'd have Isaiah, for example, then you might have a piece of the psalm, then you'd have the gospel. Well, these were puzzle pieces. I always looked at it as puzzle pieces. Well, first, when I started going to church, they were still speaking in Latin. So, I mean, what the?
That's very puzzling.
Oh, my gosh. If God talks like that, I'm shot. I mean, that was trouble. So anyway, with the Missalette, I had puzzle pieces. So these questions happened. So when I went from the Catholic Church and I went to Chico State, I went to a Newman Center, and that was more evangelical. And I was actually starting to hear sermons and a discussion that was, wow, this Jesus was real, and he had apostles that may have had some similar problems like I got. And that thought came to me, right? Now, that was a big thought, actually, because as far as I was concerned, anytime I heard about the 12 apostles, these guys were so holier than thou that there's no way, no how I'd ever be able to follow Jesus. They'd say, like, oh, come on, Steve, are you serious? No, that wasn't a very good accent. But anyway.
It sounded Yiddish.
Man, I taught drama. That was bad. Okay, so I won't try and recreate it. But anyway, from that point, what happened is intertwined with my alcoholism and failing, 2 DUIs, accidents, I mean, you name it. Me and my prayers, Lord, take this from me. No, I want it back. I mean, the tug of war.
Yeah.
So I got that going on. So this is now 1993. So I've been clean and sober now for 5 years. Pretty good math there. 5 years. And in 1993, I am with the Trinity County Office of Education in Weaverville, and I am the arts coordinator. So I coordinate art shows, docent programs. I'm working with all these people. So I'm in Weaverville. We're going to a Nazarene church. Actually, we were going to the Bethel church where Pastor Bill actually started in the theater up there in Weaverville. But this is extra information. So what happens is that I have this conversation with this good friend, Paul, and I am seeking. Well, there's 2 brothers they're not brothers, they're brothers to me, Steve Dunlap and Pat Curran. These 2 guys take their Bibles and we go downstairs in our rental house, and I am with these guys and we pray, and then I start asking questions. So I would say, where does it speak about marriage in the Bible? I was there, Timothy. And so I've got this hunger going, and I'm listening, and I am dry. It is the desert. I am thirsty. And so Brother Pat Curran gives me a box of John MacArthur Jr. tapes, Chuck Swindoll. I mean, we're talking opposite ends of the spectrum. Fire and Brimstone from John MacArthur, and Family Man stories with Swindoll. I'm getting all of this. So I am listening to Romans, and then I am just filled with this Jesus. And my friend Paul tells me, hey, Steve, you know what you really need? You just need some music. And so he gives me a Franciscan monk named John Michael Talbot. Terry Talbot, his brother, they do an album called The Painter, The Empty Canvas. I mean, I start listening, and all of a sudden, and he's singing mostly Psalms, things from the Psalms that are in there, and God is moving. I'm asking questions. So I'm in the county car, and I'm asking all sorts of questions. I've got a boom box that's seat belted on my right, and so I'm ready to just go ahead and listen to sermons and get on with it. And so it's snowing, and it's snowing in Trinity Center outside on Highway 3 North, outside of Weaverville, and I am directing a Christmas play about toys. And so it's snowing, and I'm going slow in the county car. And so Trinity Lake is on my right, and I decide, okay, I'm going to listen to this tape, The Greatest Man That Ever Lived, and it was on John the Baptist. So it's snowing. I'm going slow. And I want to hear this tape. I'm almost there with the kids. I know what to do today when the kids. And so I take this tape and I start to put it in. And then I hear, don't put in the tape. And I hear, it's not audible. I hear in my heart, don't. All of a sudden, man, it was like this light weight was over me. And I said, Lord, is that you? I'm going to put in the tape. And I go to, and then I hear it again. But it's not stronger like Headlock and the Noogie. It's, I have something for you. And so then I started shaking. I put down the tape. I heard that I needed to pull over the car. And yes, this is not audible. I'm not going nuts. I'm going to teach a school and the snow's falling and it's absolutely beautiful. And I pull over the car and I turn it off. And I just wait and I'm kind of crying and I'm shivering. And I said, Lord, what do you want? And I heard, I want a personal relationship with you. I started weeping profusely. I told him, yes, come in, take over. I've had it. I'm done. I'm done with alcoholism. I'm done with religion. I'm done with everything. I need you. And right then and there in the car, I accepted him. The ending of the story that's unbelievable is I went back after that day. I think I was quite useless that day. So anyway, I went back, told Julie what happened, and just miraculous. And I was changed. I was changed in an instant. I was absolutely changed.
I called it my Rolodex. I don't even know if you know what that is, Michael, but
yeah. From the office, I know.
Okay, there we go.
From the office.
Thank you, Michael Scott. Thank you, Michael Scott, for teaching us.
Yeah.
I was
what a Rolodex.
I'm like, look, I have this Rolodex or this file of like these experiences that I don't want to lose because those are the things that keep pushing me when my faith is wavering or I'm, not at my peak. I reference those things constantly. And they push me forward, like these experiences of your mom and your dad.
And so at this point, I'm like, dang, I done left a scholarship, I'm back home, I'm in school, but I'm just kind of lost at that point. So this family friend of mine, same guy that helped my family out when we first joined church, same guy that came to pick me up from college and spent some time with him, he helped me get an apartment by myself. And this is where my transformation starts. Like, I love my dad and I love my mom, but I didn't want to let him down, if that makes sense. Like, he was putting a financial, like, hey, I'm putting my name on the line to help you get a place.
Almost
as long as
like an investment.
Yeah, he's like, as long as you make C's in college, I'll pay half your rent. So you got to make C's. Go to school, I'll pay half your rent. So I didn't want to let him down. We talked a little about the church, and I told him that I was trying to focus more on it and stuff like that. And the biggest part of me starting to change my life is I just didn't want to let him down. Like, my parents, I don't think I could let them down, but maybe, I don't know. But I think their bar was pretty low where we were in life at the time. So me being in college was like a win.
Allenmichael, can I stop you right there? Have you ever thought about why he did what he did? What did he see?
I don't know. I don't know, man. Him and his wife was a big factor in helping us, but he just had compassion. He said that. It's crazy because they used to write my family letters. I still got the letters that he wrote my family, keeping in touch. Like, they would visit. They just loved my family. And I don't know why. He said he saw potential. Whatever that was.
Hey, you know what? There's that word, right?
In that,
Oh, the potential word, yeah.
in that case,
Yeah.
in that circumstance, that's the brilliant, beautiful side of that word, right?
But yeah, I just think it's interesting because look, there's times where you just meet people, and there's certain people that for whatever reason you just connect with their soul. You know, it's like you just know them, and they may not know that. Like I have leaders I can think back to in the church that when I was a young kid doing stupid things, that would always come over to me and put their arm around me and say, "Hey, it's all right. It's going to be, don't sweat it. We're going to be okay." Right. And I've thought many times, like, if I was in that guy's shoes, I would have walked away from me 100 times. Right. 100
Yeah.
times.
Especially my family. My goodness, man.
Right. But
He's stuck in there.
Yeah, there's certain people that you meet that are you're just connected to them, and thank God for people like that, right? That are in tune enough to say, you know what, I can look past some of this stuff because I see the potential, right? And we're not talking potential of, maybe he's thinking this a little bit, but Allenmichael is going to be this powerhouse CEO someday, and that probably will happen. I know you, but he sees the potential of who you are as a person, right? And I'm in my own life, I'm always grateful for people that could identify my potential before I knew what my own potential was.
But you know what? I think I agree, but I also think when I'm in those situations, I see me.
For sure. Right?
Like, I remember being young, dumb, broke, carless, stuff going on, right? And I'm trying to work a decent job at Long's Drugs. I'm walking in slacks and a shirt and a tie, and I got my thumb out looking for just do me a solid and take me to work, right? I got nothing, but I'm trying, and I'm telling myself in my mind, if I ever see a guy walking down the street looking the way I'm looking and needs some help, I'm going to help the guy, right? And so maybe sometimes this help, this investment, this compassion and this charity and service is really just us seeing us. Right.
I think so for sure, Mike.
And given that break that we needed.
Yeah, because I think at the same time, we see us, right, and where we are now. I look back on where we were, and I'm going to keep punting that word down the road. Like, we see the potential, like, of what that person could be, and quite honestly, that's a gospel principle, right? I mean, we see potential. If we for a second just talk about God, right? And we say this God that created us, he sees the eternal potential of who we are, right? And so there's no quit. That's why when we screw up, we can change, we can ask for forgiveness, we can go back to that well as many times as needs be, because there's someone bigger and greater than us that still sees our potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all got it. I mean, because here's the question, right, that we're all going to try to, at least one of the many questions we're going to try to figure out tonight. If we don't solve the world's problems tonight, then we've failed some.
Then the whole podcast is a failure.
Yeah, I don't care about the world's I don't care about the world's problems. I care about my problems.
Yeah, that's right.
Quinn, I need you to solve my problems.
Gotcha.
You can come back tomorrow night and work on Tyler's.
Okay.
Here's the question. If we know that, right? The three of us sitting here, we recognize that fact, that comparison is the thief of joy. So how do we ourselves combat that? And then how do we effectively give that let our children be armed with that same knowledge where it's actually meaningful. Because I think now when I tell them that, they roll their eyes and go, Dad's a slacker, he's broke. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Dad with his quotes.
Yeah, here we go again.
I don't want a quote. I want a $20 bill.
That's right. That's right.
But you know what I mean? So,
Hey, Dad, you can take that quote and shove it. I want an Audi.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel really fortunate because, I don't think a lot of people know early on what they're going to do with their lives. For me, this profession, weirdly enough, it almost partially feels like a calling in life. Like this is just what God wanted me to do. I don't know why. It just has felt that way. I guess what really comes down to is this idea of creating something. I love the idea of creating. Trying to figure things out, and it comes down to a lot of things in my life. It's not, even when I'm not doing architecture as a profession, I'm often doing it on the side at home, not necessarily just for extra money, but it's kind of become my hobby in a way. And it's just this idea of creativity. I kind of call it my God complex, this idea of creating something that wasn't there before for everybody to see.
Hey, so you mentioned something, and that actually brought to mind a story, like the best career advice I ever heard, and I think you nailed it, comes from the life of Henry B. Eyring. Henry B. Eyring's dad was a renowned scientist, and Henry B. Eyring wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps, right? So Henry was struggling through a science class, and he went to his dad. He's like, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with this?" And his dad said, "Haven't we talked about that principle before?" He's like, "Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm struggling with it." And the dad looked at him and said, science is, if it's going to be a career, you need to choose a career that you think about when you have nothing to think about. Make that your career. Make that your calling in life. And so it's interesting when you talk about doing architecture when you don't have to do architecture, right? And thinking about design and creativity. When I heard that, that's the best career advice. And that's actually what I give to my kids, right? When they're thinking about things right now, it's like, what do you think about when you have nothing to think about? And try to make that a living.
That's funny because that's not quite the same advice I give my kids. I tell my kids, if you don't know what you want to do, be a dentist. So
I just told my son. He was telling me, giving me some ideas of what he wanted to do for his career. I said, those sound great, dude, but have you thought about orthodontics? Like that sounds. There was a talk by Dieter Uchtdorf that he actually gave at a women's conference, but he talks about creating. And if it's cool with you guys, I want to read just a little bit of it. Yeah.
It says, "The desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of the human soul. No matter our talents, education, backgrounds, or abilities, we each have an inherent wish to create something that did not exist before. Everyone can create. You don't need money, position, or influence in order to create something of substance or beauty. Creation brings deep satisfaction and fulfillment. We develop ourselves and others when we take unorganized matter into our own hands and mold it into something of beauty." And I just think, it's just that idea of that sense of fulfillment of once you've created something, you can recognize your influence on the world. And, it's going to be minor or whatever, but it's just that you can create something. Everybody's been given this gift of being able to do that. So.
Okay. I got to stop you here. Because this is where we highlight. You've been invited as a guest to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I don't know how that made you feel, right? Invited. But I will tell you right now, you're speaking a language, and I'm admiring the heck out of that because I don't speak that language, right? I do know this. There are two kinds of people in the world. There are builders and there are murmurers. And I try to surround myself with builders. Quinn, I love what you're saying, but I just want to elevate what you're saying because you're saying it like it's common Joe stuff, and it's not.
And can I jump in on that, Mike? Because I like that. There's a couple things that you said, Quinn, that I like, and one is just that this idea of you knew what you wanted to do and you got to where you wanted to do it, but you recognize all of the roadblocks and the hardships that kind of existed. And I mean, there's so much to be said about just being able to grind through and get to the end goal. I mean, that's one of the many things I admire about you, Quinn, is that you've done that. I've started things and stopped things many times in my life, and I admire the fact that you've been disciplined enough to get yourself to where you want to be, recognizing that it was a bumpy road and hard to get there.
And I think the road had detours, and a lot of people hit detours that they don't come back from.
Yeah, and I think too, the other thing that you made me think about is when you're saying, you're reading that quote by Uchtdorf about creators. I'm thinking,
great quote.
Yeah, I don't have it in me. Like I'm thinking, man, I got to figure out what I am creative about. But it does force me to think a little bit, be a little bit more introspective about like what am I doing to kind of flex that creative muscle on some level. Right.
Yeah, but I would say, I mean, don't sell yourself short. I mean, you were in a band, right? You created music. You were definitely a creator, right?
You just happened to create the intro to this podcast.
Yeah.
That is something, I tell you.
But I do think building. I think, and I do think Tyler's selling himself short because I see creativity in his life as well.
Absolutely.
But I work with schools and I work with teachers, and there's an administrative friend of mine, and every time we end every conversation, one of the two of us, when we walk away, say, "Build something today."
Yeah,
that idea of building community, building people, building buildings. I mean, I think that it is important to understand that some way, shape, or form, we all have the power to build something.
Mike, I'm going to take a stab at my definition of compassion, and it's going to come from a religious perspective, but it's like, can we view others through the Savior's eyes? And how would he view other people, and how does he view us? And it takes a great deal of empathy, takes a great deal of forgiveness, and not being judgmental. You don't know what that person has ever gone through. You haven't walked in their shoes. And it really, if we step back and we look at people from a different perspective and try to understand versus judge, then I think we begin to glimpse compassion and start to understand it a little bit better. That's just me speaking. But
I like that, John. I like that sort of that formula of forgiveness, not judging, and having empathy gets us to that point where we can start to exercise compassion on some level.
I like the relationship or the connection to the Savior, right? We have scriptural records that say his bowels were filled with mercy. His bowels were filled with compassion, and he did something with it. And I think that's the difference, right? Compassion is you walk by and you see a person down, and you don't just go and sit with him and hear him out and then go about your business. You sit with him with the intent to help him out of it.
Right.
And that's what we want from friendship. That's what we want to, as dads, as husbands, right? Like compassion should drive us. And on a national stage, man, could you imagine what a little compassion would do right now?
Yeah, it'd be huge.
But I agree. John, I love your response to that question.
I think too, Mike, that I love Henry B. Eyring said that, and I'm going to totally paraphrase here, but he said that if we treated everyone that we met as if they were going through the most difficult time in their life, we'd be right more than half the time, right? And I think about that all the time, like just the idea of how we approach people, just in general. I think that sometimes we feel like, or I'll speak for myself, but I feel like, If I feel like compassion is warranted in this circumstance, I will attempt to exercise it, right? But I feel like that quote from Irene is more about approaching everyone with a level of compassion at all times.
Well, you shared in a couple episodes ago, Tyler, I think you shared that, there's this myth that life is amazing and you go through these patches of rough times, when really the opposite is probably true. Life is rough times, and occasionally you go through these moments of sunshine, right? And that reminds me, my wife texted me this the other day, this Gordon B. Hinckley quote, and I love this, right? Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time. The fact is, most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up to be just people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration, right? Like, and he goes on and just says,
I love that.
look,
I love
it's
that
about
too.
managing your expectations.
Yeah.
Right?
Because he talks about a train ride, right?
Yeah.
It's bumpy and rough and
Right.
smoke filled, and every once in a while you get to look at the beautiful vistas.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I think that there's some truth there.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have bumps, and really what it more bumps than we think. And when the water's calm, enjoy it, because there is a storm on the horizon. I promise you, there's a storm on the horizon.
Yeah. Pedal downhill is what I've heard, right?
Right. Pedal down.
Pedal downhill.
But the beauty of those things is it makes you focus on what's really important. What really in my life, of all these things, whether you may have accumulated or worked for, or accolades that people give you, really the biggest nugget or the gem is your family. To me, is your personal relationship with the Savior and your family. And when you really drill down to it, if anybody really reads the scriptures, I mean, and this is, again, I don't know your podcast, but who in the scriptures didn't have a very difficult time? I don't remember reading anybody that had a blissful life. I mean, they were faithful and they overcame challenges. I can't imagine Moses going from, being a prince in Egypt to wandering for 40 years in the desert, hungry and people complaining, being a very, a fun thing, or Abraham, having to, the challenges.
If the Savior gave us the example of a perfect life, not one day,
not one day
was ever easy.
Not one day. You're right.
This is not the first episode where the word remember has come up as an important ingredient in that success, right? And in the winning the battles we want to win. How do you remember? How do you retain in remembrance maybe what God has done for you? The times that you've been delivered, the times that you've been blessed. How do you, what strategies or what things do you have in your life that help you remember?
Well, that's a deep question, Mike. And I have to, when I reflect on that question, I really have to think that it really is. It's interesting. We are incredible about being selective in our memories of ourselves growing up. And we always kind of remember the good time. I think that's how, our survival mode.
That's how we survive, right?
That's how we survive, right? And we kind of forget the times that maybe we weren't the people that we are now, so to speak. And I think it's when you really take the time, and whether people want to call it meditation or prayer, it can be whatever it may be, but just reflect on, it's important to remind ourselves daily of the things we're grateful for, of what are we grateful for, and what are we trying to accomplish. And I look at that, and I think with our kids, they really have to know that we love them no matter what. I don't care. I do care, but if you made a terrible decision, so be it. It's done. Let me just tell you, I love you, and we'll always pick you up. We'll always go forward and move forward. It's never a done deal. And as long as they know that our love is unconditional and that's where we should be working, I do believe that they'll all come around, even if one goes astray. And I've always had this saying, if you have kids who have just made great decisions in life, be grateful. Be grateful.
Well, I love that it's never.
Don't.
I love that it's never a done deal. Right?
But-
we're never done.
It's
We're,
never-
we're all a work in progress.
Yeah. And I think too, John, I like that idea too. Like for me, when I think about remembering, right, I think that for me, it's important to have people around me that will remind me. Remind me that I'm a knucklehead. Remind me that I've done dumb things. Remind me that I've done some good things, right? And I think that's important. And again, I think that's part of why Mike and I like the idea of bringing people like you on this show, is because it's an opportunity for us to remind each other, right? That, hey, you know what, we've got some good things going on in our lives right now. Even though, you know, I've flubbed a few things, but those flubs are important too, right? Because I think about those sometimes and I just think like, man, I never want to experience that again, but thank the good Lord that I experienced that, you know?
Right. Failure, if you want to call it failure or those flubs or whatever, those are just learning opportunities. They're not, you know, you only fail if you stop. We never want to say we fail we haven't failed. It's not over yet. Yeah. It's an opportunity to try and correct or to learn. And if we're constantly realizing about ourselves, and I think about my personality, all right, hey, I lack in that area. So how can I get better? You know, how can I get better? How can I take this opportunity that I may consider it a failure, but to take it to make myself a stronger person? Because in the end, that's what matters. And
John, so looking back on things, is there a truth that you hold in your possession right now that you learned the hard way?
That I've learned the hard way?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about it. I've got a lot of those, Mike, so I'm trying to figure out which one I want to share with you. Yeah. You can, and we're going to go back to the beginning. You can never exhibit enough compassion for people, Mike. I have been in my life, I think, and I've gotten much better as I've gotten older, quick to judge. Well, I know the answer to that. You know, when you're young, you think you're smart, right?
Right.
As you're old, you realize you're like, I just danced through a minefield, and I didn't really know what I was doing.
Well, everything was so binary when you're young, right?
Yes.
Good and bad.
Yes.
Black, white.
Yes.
You don't see the layers. You don't see the wrinkles.
Right. You don't see. I've learned that, you know, as people, Mike Freeman and Tyler Gould, you guys are made up of experiences, you know, and you're on this journey to be better people, like all of us. And there's going to be stumbles, and it's not right for me to judge a stumble. If not, you guys haven't stumbled, but to judge a stumble on somebody else, but stumble on somebody else's part when I've stumbled, you know, and I think that's one thing I've learned is you could replace that judgment with love and compassion, because that's really what's going to make you a better person.
How does faith play a role with your girls, and how do you balance that? You know, because it's been such a big part of you. How do you influence them without being overbearing in their life and letting them make their own decisions?
Well, that's a good question, right? If I knew the answer to that, I would consider myself a great parent.
You got to
wait. Producer note: Toby doesn't have all the answers.
Look, we've got.
Why do we bring him on the show?
All the answers, buddy. Let's get after it.
Well, hopefully I'm kind of modeling the way, right? That they're seeing that it is an important part of my life, and that I'm making decisions not based on something that I want in the short term, right? But how it might affect kind of who I become. And, I think I'm falling short in a lot of ways. And I think my kids would probably say that, right? If they see the things that I'm not doing well. And fortunately they're recognizing like, hey, Dad, you're not doing a great job there. I'm like,
yeah, they're old enough to get a little mouthy.
Yeah. That's when I say, go to your room and shut the door. Right?
But fortunately, they're great examples to me, and they're helping me to see where I am falling short, and hopefully that makes me want to be better. I mean, it does make me want to be better, but hopefully it encourages me to change and be better. So,
what are you hoping that they're learning from you? I mean, they're watching. Our kids are always watching us, and I would agree. There's many times where I should be the teacher, and they're teaching me. And I think that's a couple of things. That's a couple. I'm fully aware of where I'm falling short as well. But this generation is amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? This generation that we've been entrusted to take care of and guide, and they are so much. I look at my own kids, and they are so much better than I ever was on my best day.
Oh, in every way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping that they're learning as you're doing your dad thing?
Well, I hope that they're learning to treat other people well. I hope that they see someone in need and they reach out a hand to help them. And I hope that if it means leaving their comfort zone to do that they'll leave their comfort zone and they'll help that person. That's truly what has brought the most joy into my life is when I've been able to help someone else. And
Toby, you look, there's a couple things that you're saying here that I love, right? One, you talk about modeling, and I love that idea. That's like in my mind all the time, right? I don't do this, and I blow it constantly. But that idea of modeling, I think you're really good at that. And the other thing that you talked about was humility, like just learning from your kids. I could do better at that, and I love that idea of like we're modeling, we're trying to learn. We want them to learn from us, but at the same time, we want to be able to learn from them. And and then the other thing is you're talking about like showing an example of helping others. I mean, look, can we bring this up for a second? Because
I think we have to go there. I mean, in fact, honestly, when the show started with us talking about East of Eden, I think the last time I hung out at Toby's house, he's reading the book in recovery from what you're about to just talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
right. So can we go there?
Dive into that. Yeah, and Toby, we want to talk about your experience of giving a young man a kidney, and kind of how that came about. And see, here's the thing, Toby. I'll say this right now. When I was told that Toby Crawford had given his kidney to a young man, I just said, "Yeah, of course he did. That is Toby Crawford. That's what he does." And so
I had the same reaction.
I was like,
honestly, joke. I don't want to. This is a very serious thing,
right?
But I know the family as well. I jokingly offered to be tested. They looked at me and said, "Yeah, not so much, man." They know there's no way there's a healthy kidney in there that's going to help their son. Like, move on. So then I hear Toby Crawford, who's a couple years my junior, is right there, and it's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, let's lift the hood on this story a little bit.
Yeah, walk us through that a little bit. Like maybe give us the brief backstory, and then I'm really interested in your thought process in making that decision to help this family out. Now, I know you, and I think that was an easy decision for you, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
Okay, well, so I guess it's been a year and a half ago. It was interesting. I went and texted a friend of mine just I don't even know, something totally unimportant. Do you want to go to lunch? Do you want to, I don't know, hang out, whatever? And I get this reply back that was like this 4-paragraph text that says, I don't know if you've heard, but I'm down in Sacramento. My son is in the hospital, has kidney failure. Make a long story short, totally unexpected. Just went in for just kind of a normal physical, and came out of there getting life flighted down to Sacramento to a pediatric unit where they specialize, kidney, renal issues. And so I was blown away. I got this text just totally out of the blue, had no idea if this was going on. And, my immediate response was, of course, I'm shocked. And I send back a text, I'm so sorry. I had no idea if there's anything I can do. If you need a kidney, I'd certainly be willing to get tested. And at the time, looking back on it, I actually think it was a little insensitive to just go right there, because, it was just kind of obviously was an instinctive reaction, not really putting a lot of thought into it. And I'm sure that he had heard that. And, and I don't know that it really would have been that comforting, but it truly meant that I was concerned and wanted to help. So, he gets off or we stop texting, and he's, go back to our normal business. But I was really thinking about this, and I immediately kind of went to my computer and started Googling just kidney donation and what that process looks like. And so I started, I found out what I need to do to go get tested, and it kind of all just happened pretty quickly. But there were some people as I was going through this that they were shocked to hear that I was doing it. They were, I think, a little concerned for me. I think they thought I wasn't really thinking it through. But it wasn't the first time I'd actually thought about doing this. I had a friend maybe 7 or 8 years ago that had some kidney issues, and it made me think at that time, is that something I'd be willing to do? And so I think I'd come to the conclusion that I would, at least I'd consider it and look into it. And then even years before that, as a kid, I remember my dad had an aunt that had a liver failure, and he had gotten tested to see if he would be a match to donate part of his liver. And I remember how remarkable that was to me, that he would do that, because especially at the time, the idea of someone cutting me open, taking a piece of my organ out that was beyond something I could comprehend. And so but I remember I've thought about that through my life. Is that something that I'd be willing to do? So here it is.
Resonated. Can I interrupt you really quick?
Yeah.
So watching your dad have that, I love how you called it an instinctive reaction, because that's not everyone's instinctive reaction, right? But as a kid, watching your dad have that thought, that stuck in your brain?
Oh, absolutely. I still think of it to this day. And, it's not necessarily an easy thing to go through, but I will say, actually, after having done it, that it was quite a bit easier than I would have thought. And I had some complications after the surgery. You probably know that I ended up having to have a second surgery. I had an infection and different things, and it was, inconvenient. But I've never regretted doing it. It was something that certainly I hope has made someone else's life better. And so
So how do you feel? What is your relationship like with that young man and his family right now?
You
It's
know,
gotta be pretty special, right?
it is really a special thing. You know, right now it's a scary time for them because the young man, you know, he's essentially been isolated for the year since it's happened because you know, because of the drugs and things that they have to give him for anti-rejection and that sort of thing. It's kind of weakened his immune system, and so any kind of, you know, respiratory infection or whatever could be, I don't know, maybe life-threatening, or but it could be severe. And now with this coronavirus going on, it's really a threat. So so he's been isolated, and I haven't been able to see him, but you know, I get texts from him every few days, just, hey, how you doing, Toby? I hope you're well. I hope things are going well with you and your family. And you know, he's always reaching out and wondering, you know, asking how I'm doing. And it is a special connection. And of course, his parents, they of course have been just extremely grateful. And I don't, you know, I never have asked for anything, and I don't ever want anything, and but I am grateful for the friendship that we've developed.
Well, and thanks for sharing that. And I know you, and there's no way that was going to come out of your mouth without us asking that question. I know it even puts you in an uncomfortable position to talk about that experience because it's not about you. It never is, and your humility to me is always exemplary. But that is an incredible story. That having friends like Toby in our life just kind of help us keep that perspective, right? Keep that. And I don't know about you, but as a middle-aged person now, I sometimes have a hard time realizing that I'm in the spot where the younger generation is looking. Right? I'm still listening to Jay-Z. I'm still listening, you know, and I have a hard time, like, my kid is walking, we're on a trail, and they're watching my steps, and they're stepping where I'm stepping.
Yeah.
Right. So that old idea of like, hey, watch your step.
Right.
That's humbling. That's humbling to me to realize that, you know, I mean, we started the conversation with Toby talking about him growing up and who he looked up to. Well, that's us now, gentlemen.
Right.
Right. That's us.
And
I still look up to Toby. It's
and
like,
the girls that you wanted with the car are now our daughters.
And that's scary.
That's terrible. Terrible. Yeah, that is terrible.
I just threw up a little bit. Hey, I'm going to ask a question, not even on the script, but I'm curious. I got two of my favorite people in a virtual room here. We've talked about faith, and we've talked about, I mean, let's put aside our particular church, and let's just talk about children and a loving God, right? Has there ever been a moment, there's 7 billion people on the planet. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you know you are known? Do you know that there's a God who knows Tyler Gould, Toby Crawford, Mike Freeman? An experience, something that comes to mind where it's like, in that moment, I knew.
Well, I've certainly had experiences, very, you know, I guess personal experiences where I felt inspiration from something well beyond me, and I recognize it as my Heavenly Father speaking to me. But even more than that, I can look back on times in my life, the very difficult times in my life, you know, I would say dark times, where you know, at the time I felt alone and helpless, and yet looking back on that, getting through that, I can look back and see that there was a loving God that helped me through that and put the right people on my path, and I think that's actually helped me to understand and know that there's that I do have there's a God above, and that He loves me, because because I really don't feel like I could have made it through those times without having that hand in my life. And I didn't necessarily recognize it at the time, but I certainly recognize it now.
I love that thought, Toby, because I think I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think there's a lot of times where we, at least for myself, I hear other people talk about these big, grand experiences that they've had in their faith. And I'm the guy that's had a lot of really small experiences in my faith that over a time has accumulated into something big, and for me, a lot of that is just the people that are in my life. And I count you guys as part of that. You just, sometimes you have the right people that come along that say the right things that for whatever reason you feel totally connected to those people. And I put you guys on that list, but that to me is like a huge faith building experience. There's been many times in my own life where I felt like you had felt, Toby, and someone comes along and just says something. And I'm sure in their mind, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, you're like, I don't have a lot to give here, but I'm willing to participate. Right. There's a lot of people in my life that I think would say the exact same thing that you said, that have said really small and in their minds, inconsequential things that have completely changed my life, and pushed me back onto a path or changed my direction entirely, and I think that to me, that's where my faith is really strengthened, when I have those small moments. And I don't spend my time chasing after those big moments. I spend my time now collecting those small moments and recognizing how at every turn there's a God that is actively involved in what I do.
Okay, so I have a quick question for you guys.
Yeah.
Have you seen the documentary, The Dawn Wall?
No.
Okay, watch it. It's about the two guys that climb El Capitan, the Dawn Wall, and they do it. It takes them like 19 days or whatever.
What's the guy's name? Is he the one who lost his fingers or finger?
Yes,
I did watch that. Yes.
Yeah, Tommy Caldwell.
Yeah.
So
the Dawn Wall, like DAWN?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so there's a moment, and spoiler, right? I mean, you've probably seen these guys in the news or whatever. They were the first ones to climb this, to free climb this Dawn Wall. And there's a segment in there where they get to, there's 32 pitches, I think, that they have to do. And there's a segment in there where they get to 15. Number 15 is the hardest. And the Tommy Caldwell, the main guy, he actually makes it through after a couple attempts. But the other guy, Kevin Jurgensen or something, he tries it for days, like literally days. I think it's 4 or 5 days. And finally, Tommy's like, look, I can't, I don't know how long the weather's going to hold. And I've had this dream and this goal I've set. I've been working on it for 7 years or whatever. And he goes, I got to go to the top. And so he starts climbing. He does the rest of these pitches. He gets to a point where he knows that he can finish. And here the other guy now has just become support because he wasn't able to do number 15. And Tommy, he's sitting there and he goes, he's basically accomplished this remarkable feat, this almost impossible feat. And he's sitting there and he realizes, this means nothing if my friend doesn't make it up there with me. And so he goes back down, they go back and they start over on pitch number 15 until Kevin gets it done. And, I think about that a lot with you guys, that, my life is, the things I accomplish, I feel are pretty meaningless without other people being there with me. And I feel that way. And as I've been, preparing for this and talking to you guys, it reminds me that you guys are those types of friends that I'm grateful. You make my accomplishments more meaningful. So thank you.
You make it easy, brother.
So listen, on that note, let's figure out how we can all go golfing together again one of these
Dude,
days.
yes.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.